Welcome, my dear listeners. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to enjoy more original stories every week. The Inspector Price Mystery Series is a trademarked original, available exclusively on this channel. Settle in, the mystery awaits, the Curse of Harrowgate House. Chapter 1, The Midnight Toll. The telegram arrived at Scotland Yard in the early hours of a fog-drenched October morning. It bore the terse official hand of the local magistrate of North Riding, Yorkshire. Urgent. Death under suspicious circumstances. Sir Edmund Harrow deceased. Request immediate assistance. Possible foul play. Magistrate William Bradshaw, Thistledown Village. Inspector Harold Price, coat still damp from the persistent London mist, read the wire twice, his brow furrowing deeper with each word. Harrowgate House. The name rang faint bells, something about an old family seat, reclusive nobility, and stories whispered at gentlemen's clubs. Not ghosts, surely, Price thought, but gossip. He folded the paper, tucked it into his coat pocket, and summoned his assistant to prepare for departure. By midday, the steam train had wound its way past craggy hills and mist-laced valleys. Thistledown Station greeted them with a mournful whistle and an unmanned platform. Awaiting the inspector stood a dour-looking coachman, bundled in a long oilskin and gripping a weathered sign, Inspector Price. As the carriage rolled toward Harrowgate House, the countryside grew more desolate. "Has there been any word from the family?" Price asked the coachman, over the clatter of hooves. "Only Lady Harrow, sir," came the reply. "She's unsettled. Sir Edmund was found with his eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-scream. No marks on him, no blood. Doctor can't make sense of it. Folks round here say it's the curse." "Curse?" Price raised an eyebrow. The coachman glanced sideways, his face pale despite the chill. "Begging your pardon, sir, but folks say the Harrows have been cursed since the old days. Ever since the hanging judge ordered that poor maid whipped to death on the moors. Strange deaths run in the family." Inspector Price said nothing. He had no use for ghost stories. Harrowgate House emerged like a brooding relic from another age, its grey stone facade blotched with lichen, its battlements jagged against the sky. Ivy clung to its western wing like a claw, and crows circled above its towers. Price stepped down into the gravel drive. At the entrance stood Lady Evelyn Harrow, tall and stately, draped in mourning black with a lace veil that did little to hide her piercing eyes. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and sharp. "Inspector, thank you for coming so swiftly." "My condolences, Lady Harrow," Price replied, removing his hat. "May I see the body?" She nodded. "This way." Sir Edmund's chambers were on the second floor. A heavy oak door creaked open to reveal a room frozen in time. Fire had long gone out. The air held the scent of lavender, and something fainter, camphor perhaps. The body lay in the four-poster bed, covers undisturbed. Sir Edmund's face was ghastly, his eyes wide with what could only be described as terror. His mouth was agape, as though he had tried to scream, and died mid-breath. No bruising, no signs of struggle, only the look of one who had stared into some unfathomable dread. "Doctor?" Price asked, turning to the man standing nearby. "Dr. Lionel Carver, village physician," the man said, wringing his hands. "There's no clear cause, no sign of apoplexy. Heart was strong as far as I know. I've treated him for gout, nothing more. Could he have been poisoned? I've found no residue in the mouth or under the nails. No discoloration. If it was poison, it was unlike any I've encountered." Price frowned. "And no disturbance during the night?" Lady Harrow stepped in. "None. I checked on him myself at 10:30. He was reading. The housemaid brought his warm milk shortly after. This morning—" She trailed off. "Who has access to this room?" Price asked. "Myself, the maid Elsie, and his manservant Godfrey." "And where are they now?" "In the east wing," she said. "I have kept everyone in the house until your arrival." Inspector Price walked around the room, taking in every detail. The fireplace was untouched. A teacup rested on the nightstand, empty but clean. A copy of the Times lay folded beside it. Her pocket watch on the table ticked steadily. Then something caught his eye. The drapes were slightly parted, just enough to allow a sliver of moonlight to pass through. Price stepped closer. On the window pane, faintly etched as if by a child's finger or a dry cloth, was a strange curved marking. A single letter, or perhaps a symbol, like an inverted crescent. Beneath it, 3 small dots. He turned to Lady Harrow. "Does this mean anything to you?" She paled. "Good Lord, it's the mark of the screaming widow." Price didn't blink. "The what?" "It's a legend, a ghost. Supposedly, she marks the glass of those she visits the night before they die." Inspector Price stared at the ghostly etching. Someone wanted the household to believe in ghosts and phantoms, and he had every intention of discovering who. Chapter 2. The Legend of the Screaming Widow. The library at Harrowgate House was a cathedral of silence. Rows of ancient books loomed from floor to ceiling, their spines dusty and cracked with age. The fire crackled weakly in the hearth, casting long shadows across the Persian rug. Inspector Harold Price sat in a high-backed leather chair, flanked by Lady Evelyn Harrow and Dr. Lionel Carver, both looking pale and strained under the weight of the revelations. The inspector withdrew his notebook and tapped his pencil against the cover. "Let us speak plainly, Lady Harrow. What precisely is this screaming widow the villagers are muttering about?" Lady Evelyn exhaled slowly, her gloved fingers tightening around a porcelain teacup. "It is a tale, older than this house. It dates back to the 17th century, perhaps earlier. The story goes that a maid named Elspeth March was wrongly accused of theft by one of the Harrow ancestors, a magistrate they called the Hanging Judge. He had her flogged and left to die in the moorland woods. They say her spirit returned to curse the Harrow bloodline, particularly the firstborn sons. Convenient that a family curse always seems to target the line of inheritance, Price said dryly. Dr. Carver shifted uncomfortably. "I must admit, Inspector, even I've heard tales. Some claim Sir Edmund's great-grandfather died in much the same way. Eyes wide open, no cause of death found." "I deal in facts," Price replied, though he made a note of the details. "And facts, Lady Harrow, begin with people." He closed his notebook and rose. "I'd like to interview the household staff, separately." Lady Harrow rang a brass bell, and within moments, a slender young maid with ginger curls peeked nervously around the door. Her apron was crisp, but her hands trembled as she curtsied. "This is Elsie Brent, the parlour maid," said Lady Harrow. "She was the last to see Sir Edmund alive." Price gestured for Elsie to sit, and the girl obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair, like a sparrow ready to flee. "You brought Sir Edmund his warm milk last night?" "Yes, sir," she said softly, "as I always do." "Did he seem agitated?" She bit her lip. "A little, perhaps. He asked if the curtains were drawn properly. I told him they were. He kept glancing at the window." "Did he say why?" "No, sir, but he asked me something odd. He asked if I'd ever heard anyone weeping in the corridors at night." Price paused. "Had you?" She hesitated. "Well, yes, sir. A few times. A woman sobbing, real faint-like. I thought it was the wind, but once it was right behind me, near the west corridor." Lady Harrow stood abruptly. "Inspector, this is nonsense. She's frightened and confused. I have no patience for ghost stories." Price held up a calming hand. "I appreciate your candour, Elsie. That will be all for now." After the maid had scurried out, Price asked to see the manservant next. Godfrey Milner entered with a quiet dignity, his silver hair neatly combed, his butler's jacket buttoned to the collar. He bowed to the inspector and waited. "You've been in service here long?" 32 years, sir. I served Sir Edmund's father before him." "Did your master complain of any ailments recently?" "None of significance. He disliked the cold damp but took his tonic regularly. He seemed contemplative of late." "In what way?" Godfrey folded his hands. "He spent more time in the East Wing, where Lady Margaret's portrait hangs." "Lady Margaret?" Sir Edmund's late sister. She drowned in the ornamental lake at age 17. A tragedy the family seldom speaks of. Price noted this. And last night? I retired at 11 sharp. My room is in the servants' quarters. I neither saw nor heard anything. Has Sir Edmund ever spoken of the screaming widow? Godfrey's face twitched ever so slightly. He dismissed such tales, but once, 5 years ago, after Lady Margaret's death, I found him standing in the corridor outside his room. Just standing there, shivering, muttering something about glass. Glass, he said. She marked the glass again. I asked who, and he told me to leave. The inspector thanked Godfrey and dismissed him. As the door shut behind the butler, Price turned to Lady Harrow. May I see this east wing? The one with the portrait? Lady Evelyn hesitated. It's not used any more. It's damp and half empty. I still wish to see it. The east wing was colder than the rest of the house. Its walls were bare in places, the wallpaper peeling, a faint smell of mildew in the air. They passed several closed doors before reaching a narrow gallery, where a large portrait hung beneath a curtain of dust. Lady Margaret Harrow. She had the delicate, wistful beauty of a romantic painting, long dark curls, pale eyes, and a slight smile that seemed almost too alive for canvas. She drowned? Price asked. Yes, in the ornamental lake. They say she walked out in the middle of the night and never came back. Her slippers were found by the water's edge, no signs of a struggle. Price studied the painting. Was she sleepwalking? Unwell? She was fragile, Lady Harrow said, her voice tinged with something between sorrow and guilt. We never spoke of it. He nodded, then paused, eyes narrowing at the window nearby. The outer glass pane bore another faint smear, this one less clear, more like fingers dragging across the surface. The inspector stepped closer. This wing is unused, yet this mark is fresh. Lady Harrow stared. Good heavens. I'd like to have that window dusted, Price muttered. Then he noticed something else, a faint shape on the floor, almost missed in the fading light. He crouched and picked up a scrap of paper, no larger than a coin. It had been torn from something larger and was yellowed at the edges. Written on it, in a delicate but unmistakable hand, were the words, "Do not trust the one who sings." He held it up. Does this mean anything to you? Lady Evelyn shook her head slowly. No, but my sister-in-law was a singer. Margaret sang beautifully. Price frowned. Was she the only one in the family with a gift for music? No, Lady Evelyn said slowly, her voice touched with confusion. There was someone else, but I can't remember who. That evening, as dusk fell over Harrowgate, Inspector Price stood alone at the lake's edge. The surface reflected the house behind him, like a broken mirror. He stared down at his own reflection, thinking, not of ghosts, but of motives. Somewhere within Harrowgate House, he felt sure, someone was trying to raise the dead, or at least convince others they had. Chapter 3. The Heir Apparent. The morning after his inspection of the East Wing, Inspector Harold Price awoke early and descended the grand staircase of Harrowgate House, to the scent of wood smoke and the clatter of china in the breakfast room. Lady Harrow had not yet emerged, but a young footman, too new to be of help, nervously offered him a pot of strong Yorkshire tea and a plate of toast. By 8:30, a low rumble echoed through the courtyard. A motor car crunched along the gravel and came to a halt outside the front entrance. The door burst open, and in swept a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark travel coat, his boots muddied from the village roads. He removed his cap, revealing thick chestnut hair and storm-grey eyes that swept the room with quick, military precision. Lionel Harrow, he announced, in a clipped accent. I assume you're the inspector. Price rose to greet him. Inspector Harold Price of Scotland Yard. I was informed you were returning from India. Calcutta, Lionel replied briskly, removing his gloves. I boarded the first available steamer, arrived in Dover last night, and drove from London this morning. Will there be an inquest? I requested a delay until I complete my investigation. Lionel's jaw tightened. Is there reason to believe my father's death wasn't natural? There is no clear cause of death, but there are irregularities, Price said carefully. I'd prefer to speak with you privately. They moved to the study, a richly panelled room lined with hunting trophies and faded maps of the Empire. A large desk dominated the centre, papers still arranged in precise stacks. Price gestured toward a leather chair. Tell me, Mr. Harrow, when did you last speak to your father? 6 months ago. We exchanged letters more often than visits. Our last communication was about the estate's finances and a minor dispute over a parcel of land near Wensleydale. Would you describe your relationship as close? Lionel gave a rueful smile. Respectful, but not affectionate. He was a proud man. Traditional, stubborn. Did he express any concerns in his recent letters? Lionel hesitated. He mentioned once that he was troubled by the atmosphere of the house. Said things felt off. I chalked it up to isolation. He wasn't one for superstitions, but I think the memories of Margaret haunted him. Price nodded slowly. What can you tell me about her death? Lionel's face darkened. She was delicate, prone to melancholy. She was bright, clever, and very lonely. Her death was ruled accidental, but I never quite believed it. She had no reason to be near the lake that night. The inspector leaned forward. Do you know of any tension within the house recently? Any grievances among staff or family? Lionel laughed bitterly. Inspector, my father had spent the last 10 years slowly alienating every person in his life. He dismissed half the staff during the war to preserve family dignity. He had no close friends, only retainers. And Lady Evelyn, he paused. Well, she is not what you'd call maternal. Price noted the phrasing. She's your stepmother? Yes. Married my father the year after my mother died. I was already in boarding school. We never warmed to each other. There was a knock at the door, and the butler Godfrey appeared, his face grave. Beg pardon, Inspector. There's been an incident. Price stood at once. Where? The drawing room. The chandelier fell. The drawing room was a grand space of rosewood and velvet, with tall windows overlooking the southern gardens. By the time Price arrived, the staff had gathered in hushed alarm near the threshold. At the centre of the room, the ornate crystal chandelier lay in shattered ruin, its brass chains all twisted. Lionel stood nearby, brushing fine dust from his sleeve. I was inspecting the room when the damn thing dropped, missed me by a yard. Price knelt to examine the ceiling mount. The bolts had been cleanly sheared. He frowned. Godfrey, he called, when was this fixture last serviced? 3 months ago, sir. I oversaw it myself. There were no issues. Who had access to the ladder? Only myself, Tom the groundsman, and Mr. Baines, the handyman. Summon them both. I want to know who was in this room last. Lady Harrow arrived, pale and breathless. Lionel, are you hurt? No, only rattled, he replied, but his eyes were cold. Seems someone in this house would prefer I joined father. Price stood. This wasn't an accident. It's deliberate sabotage. He paced slowly. Your father dies mysteriously, and the heir barely escapes injury. Lady Harrow, where were you this morning? In the East Conservatory, she said, frowning. I take my coffee there each morning. You may ask the maid. And the rest of the staff? Elsie stepped forward. We was in the kitchen, sir, preparing for lunch. No one left but Tom to fetch logs. Find Tom, Price said to Godfrey, quietly, and keep him under supervision. By evening the house had descended into a state of suspicion. Lionel retired to his rooms with a brandy decanter and a pistol. Lady Harrow wandered the hallways, visibly shaken, but too proud to admit it. The staff whispered in corners, eyes darting toward darkened windows. Inspector Price, meanwhile, returned to Sir Edmund's chambers to re-examine the scene. Something still gnawed at him, a detail he had overlooked. He scanned the shelves of books beside the bed, mostly naval histories and accounts of the Indian Mutiny. Then one oddity, a thin, leather-bound volume entitled Whispers of the Dead, Yorkshire Folklore. The spine had a fresh crease. Price opened it. Inside, underlined in pencil, was a passage. To see the widow's mark thrice is to know death is near. The first is a warning. The second, a claim. The third, an end. Beneath the passage, someone had scribbled, "Curtains drawn, doors locked, still she comes." Price shut the book with a snap and turned toward the fireplace. The ashes were faint, undisturbed, but among the grey was a scrap of burned parchment, thicker than paper. He carefully lifted it with a poker and found the edge of a wax seal, half melted, with the imprint of a lion rampant. He had seen that seal before, at the Foreign Office. Price immediately knew what this could mean. What if Sir Edmund had not simply died of fear? What if he had discovered something he wasn't meant to know? Chapter 4. The Locked Cabinet. The following morning, the mood in Harrowgate House was filled with dread. The servants moved with the quiet desperation of people being watched. Lionel remained shut in the study, armed and brooding. Lady Evelyn, when she appeared, was tense and withdrawn, and for once said nothing about the weather or the way the tea had been brewed. Inspector Harold Price, however, was thinking not about teacups but documents, specifically what had become of Sir Edmund's will. "There must be a copy," he said to Godfrey, as they stood outside the late baronet's private study, "or at least a ledger of the estate holdings." Godfrey inclined his head. "Sir Edmund was a man of order. I expect you'll find what you need in the cabinet, sir." Price unlocked the study door and stepped into a room that smelt faintly of pipe tobacco and beeswax. Heavy curtains allowed only slivers of morning light to filter in. The mahogany desk sat in solemn command at the centre, and beside it, tall against the wall, stood a cabinet of carved walnut, its brass lock gleaming in the dim light. But when Price inserted the key taken from the butler, the lock resisted. He frowned. "Are you certain this is the right key?" Godfrey looked puzzled. "It should be, sir, unless—" Price reached into his coat and removed a leather pouch. Within it, a delicate set of lock-picking tools, standard issue for special investigations. With slow, careful movements, he probed the mechanism. There was resistance, but not from rust. "Someone's tampered with this," he muttered. "Recently. See here, scratches near the keyhole. Someone's forced it before." After several minutes of silent work, there was a soft click, and the cabinet creaked open. Inside, all the file drawers were empty, save for one. And that lone drawer was half open, as though someone had been interrupted mid-search. In it lay only two items, a red leather-bound folder and a black velvet pouch the size of a snuff tin. Price removed the folder first. It bore no title, only a faintly embossed number, 147. Opening it, he found pages of dense handwriting, each marked private, eyes only. The content was jarring. It detailed meetings, covert, unsanctioned discussions between Sir Edmund and unnamed individuals regarding land transfers, mineral rights and, most puzzling, influence zones near Scarfell Moor. There were references to a company called Northmoor Consortium, which Price had never heard of. But what truly caught his attention was a letter tucked in the back, unsigned, but written in precise script. "You must understand the consequences, Edmund. That land cannot fall into government hands. If they find what lies beneath, it will undo generations of quiet work. You've made promises that cannot be unmade. Silence is now your duty. Burn this letter after reading." Sir Edmund, evidently, had not. Price's gaze shifted to the velvet pouch. Inside, nestled in a layer of cotton, was a signet ring, a gold band bearing the same lion rampant seal he'd seen in the ashes by the fireplace. "Interesting," Price murmured. "What is it, sir?" Godfrey asked. "Something official and dangerous." As Price emerged from the study, he was met in the corridor by Lady Evelyn, now recovered and icily composed. "Inspector, I must speak with you." "Of course." She led him to the blue drawing-room, a place of faded elegance and silence. Once the door was shut, her expression changed. Not cold, but afraid. "I've remembered something," she said. "About Margaret, about the night she died." Price sat. "Go on." She was very disturbed in those final weeks, pale, jumpy. I thought it was grief or nerves, but one night I heard her speaking, arguing with someone in the gallery. When I entered, she was alone. I asked who she'd been speaking to. She claimed it was no one, but I remember what she said before I entered. I remember it exactly. What did she say? Lady Evelyn looked away, her voice low. She said, "You can't silence him forever. You don't own the dead." Did Sir Edmund know of this? Price asked. He dismissed it, said she was unwell, but I think she knew something. Something dangerous. Price stood. I believe you. Lady Evelyn blinked. You do? Yes, because I believe your husband was murdered, and someone in this house is prepared to kill again, to keep a secret buried. That afternoon, Lionel asked to speak with Price in confidence. They met again in the late baronet's study. I found this among father's effects, Lionel said, handing over a sealed envelope. It's addressed to me, but I haven't opened it. I thought it best you see it first. Price broke the seal and unfolded a single page. The handwriting was Sir Edmund's, firm, slanted. Lionel, if you are reading this, then I am dead, and I do not believe it to be of natural cause. I have recently uncovered something that threatens more than just this family's name. Do not trust appearances. Look to the oldest stones. The truth lies beneath them. Burn the rest, and guard the house. Father? Price folded the letter slowly. Did your father ever mention anything to do with Scarfell Moor? Lionel blinked. Yes, that land belonged to us decades ago. My great-grandfather sold it to a private mining company, but the moor's been empty ever since. Nothing grows there, and animals avoid it. Local superstition. Price handed him the red folder. Your father may have been more entangled than you realise. Lionel read in silence. His eyes hardened. Northmere. I've heard whispers. They deal in land acquisitions quietly, often fronted by shell companies. But this is different. This reads like espionage. I agree. A knock interrupted them. It was Elsie, white as a sheet. Sir, you'd better come. In the main corridor near the servants' wing, a mirror had been shattered. Beneath it, on the wall, a symbol had been scrawled in soot. The inverted crescent with 3 dots, the widow's mark, and this time beside it, a message was written in a trembling hand. The second mark is laid. One more to claim the last. Price stared at it grimly. 3 marks, he said aloud. Sir Edmund saw the first, now the second has appeared. Godfrey, who stood nearby, whispered, Then who's next? Price didn't answer, but in his mind the suspects narrowed, and a sense of urgency grew. The killer was watching, and the third mark would not be a warning. It would be an execution. Chapter 5. Poisoned Ink. Inspector Harold Price stood before the soot-streaked wall in the servants' wing, the morning's pale light filtering through the tall windows behind him. The second mark had been left so deliberately, so theatrical, that it could only mean one thing. Someone in the house wanted to be seen, or worse, was playing a game. He ordered the area cordoned off and sent for Lady Harrow and Lionel. The mark had appeared barely an hour after breakfast. No one claimed to have seen who made it, yet the soot had not dried, and the edge of the rag used to scrawl the symbols had been found smouldering in the scullery fire. This message wasn't made in haste, Price murmured. It was meant to be found. Later that morning, while the staff were assembled for questioning, a new arrival at the front door added to the thickening storm. A sharp-featured, wiry man in a tan overcoat and wire-rimmed spectacles. He introduced himself crisply as Mr. Horace Lively, solicitor to the Harrow family estate. I was told Sir Edmund's death may require formal review, he said. There are financial matters which must be addressed, particularly with Mr. Lionel's return. Lionel, who had just entered from the hall, looked grim. Then we might as well review the will now. Mr. Lively's brows arched. That's the trouble. The will is missing. The official copy kept here in the study gone, and the duplicate held at my firm was requested for delivery a week ago by someone using your father's seal. The courier who fetched it bore proper credentials, yet I find no such individual in my records. Price turned sharply. Who signed for it? The solicitor unfolded a receipt. The name is illegible, but the courier used the family code, a passphrase known only to Sir Edmund and his legal proxy. And what was this passphrase? Mr. Lively hesitated. The widow sings at midnight. Lady Evelyn went white. That was Margaret's lullaby. Indeed, Price said, voice low. Someone is invoking ghosts to cover their crimes. That evening, Price examined Sir Edmund's personal desk again, this time more thoroughly. Amid correspondence, journals, and financial papers, one item drew his eye. A sealed letter addressed to C. Barrow, bearing the sigil of the Ministry of Natural Resources. Price carefully sliced it open. Inside were detailed notes about deposits of radium and rare earth elements beneath Scafell Moor. Sir Edmund had apparently stumbled upon geological maps marked as confidential and sent to him in error. They showed not just mining potential, but evidence of illegal prospecting by Northmoor Consortium and possible collusion with members of the local council. A separate sheet, unsigned, carried a warning. You are advised to remain silent, Edmund. You have no allies in this. Price stood slowly. Scafell Moor wasn't just superstition, it was valuable, dangerous, worth killing for. But the final discovery came by accident. While examining the blotter pad on the desk, Price noticed faint indentations, residue from a letter written and torn away. He sprinkled charcoal dust over the pad and held a mirror above it. Slowly, the message emerged. I fear Lionel suspects too much. If he finds the ledger, he'll uncover the truth about Margaret. And about me. Price froze. There were 2 people in the house with that initial. Godfrey, he called, bring me a candle, a quill, and the ledger book from the hall. The candlelight flickered as Price sat in the library with Elsie, the young maid. I want to show you something, he said. He dipped the quill in lemon juice and wrote the word test on a blank sheet of parchment, then held it briefly above the candle's flame. Slowly, the letters emerged, darkened by heat. Invisible ink, Elsie whispered. I've heard of it. So had Sir Edmund, Price said. He opened the estate ledger, turned to the back pages, and gently warmed them near the flame. Nothing appeared. Then on the third to last page, lines of hidden writing began to darken. Price's eyes widened as he read. Margaret knew about the land. She read the contracts. She overheard the meeting. She tried to tell Lionel, but I stopped her. She ran to the lake that night. I followed. I never meant. The writing ended abruptly. Inspector Price closed the book and sat back. Someone in Harrowgate House had killed twice. Once, years ago, and now, again. The truth was coming closer, creeping through the corridors like the chill that always preceded a storm. He now had 2 undeniable facts. Sir Edmund had discovered a deadly conspiracy involving land, wealth, and corruption. Margaret Harrow had known something and died for it. Now someone else was trying to bury those secrets once more, and the third mark had yet to be laid. Chapter 6. Voices in the Walls. The rain returned that evening with a vengeance, lashing against the windows of Harrowgate House. Inspector Harold Price stood in the upper corridor, outside the east wing, the faint hiss of the gas lamps echoing in the silence. He had not yet told the household of what he'd discovered in the ledger, the mention of Margaret, the hidden confession, but he now felt certain someone had been moving freely through the house in secret. He turned to Godfrey, who stood quietly beside him. There are unused passageways in the house, are there not? Godfrey gave a slow nod. Yes, sir. From the old days. A few were bricked up during renovations. Others remained forgotten. The late Sir Edmund didn't care for modernising things too much, especially not this wing. Could someone use them to access bedrooms, or observe the inhabitants unnoticed? Yes, sir, the butler said grimly. It's possible. Then fetch me a lantern, I'm going in. The entrance was hidden behind a panel in the linen closet of the east wing. It gave a faint click when Price pressed the lower corner, and with a whisper of displaced air, the panel swung inward to reveal a narrow, dust-choked passage, no more than 3 feet across. The walls were rough stone, and the air had the thick, stale quality of something long sealed. The only light came from the flickering lantern Price carried in one hand. He moved forward carefully. The passage curved and dipped slightly, branching once toward the western bedrooms, and again toward what Price calculated must be the drawing room. It was just wide enough for a person to crouch through, and it explained everything. The scrawled marks, the vanishing footprints, the creaking noises heard by the staff in the night. Someone was living or hiding within these walls. Halfway down the second passage, he stopped. A faint sound ahead, like a whisper. He held his breath. There it was again. A low, murmuring voice, almost singing. She comes in white, she comes in grey, to take the soul that cannot stay. It was a woman's voice, faint but steady. He moved forward. The corridor ended at a rotting wooden panel, its backside fitted with a peephole drilled through the eyes of a portrait. He crouched to peer through it. The other side revealed the library, lit now only by firelight, and there, seated at the desk, was Lady Evelyn. She was writing rapidly in a journal, her lips moving, echoing the rhyme. 3 marks and then it's done. The house shall have but only one. Price exhaled, pulling back from the peephole. He didn't move yet. Something was still wrong. Then he heard another sound, behind him. He spun, nothing, then the faintest scratch, and a sudden cold breath at the nape of his neck. He raised the lantern. A figure stood in the passage, cloaked in black, face hidden by a half-mask, identical to a mourning veil. Price fired a shot, but the figure ducked away and vanished down the passage. Lantern swinging, he gave chase, boots pounding on uneven stone. He emerged at the far side of the servants' wing, breathless, just as Godfrey came running with 2 footmen. "I saw someone, cloaked, in the walls," Elsie gasped. "The ghost?" "No ghost," Price said grimly. "A killer." They searched the passages again, this time more thoroughly, but the figure had vanished. Only the faint outline of soot remained on a wall, shaped like a handprint. That night, Price sat alone in the library, reviewing all the pieces. Sir Edmund's death, the missing will, the chandelier sabotage, the invisible ink, the whispered songs, the passages in the walls, and now, someone using those hidden paths to spy and perhaps to strike again. But why the theatrics? Why the ghostly legends? Why dress as the screaming widow? Unless it wasn't merely disguise, it was symbolic. The killer wasn't just hiding. They were performing, reenacting something, carrying on a ritual. Just before midnight, Price received a knock at his door. It was Lionel, pale and breathing hard. "She's missing?" "Who?" "Lady Evelyn. No one's seen her since supper. Her room is empty. And the third mark, look." He held up a handkerchief. Upon it, a soot-smeared third symbol drawn hastily. "She left this on my pillow," Lionel said. "It was folded around my cufflinks." "Then we're out of time," Price said. They searched the house again. No sign of Lady Evelyn, but then Price remembered the letter. "The truth lies beneath the stones. The cellars." He led the party down into the basement, a warren of damp chambers and crumbling wine vaults. As they rounded the final corner, the lantern revealed a slumped figure in a silk dressing gown on the ground. Lady Evelyn, unconscious but alive. Beside her, an overturned goblet. Beside the goblet, a torn scrap of paper, with writing in a familiar, frantic hand. "She'll take me next. I hear her walking. I tried to stop it. I tried. Forgive me, Margaret." And beneath the note, the signet ring. Inspector Price picked it up and stared down at the woman, unconscious, but breathing shallowly. He turned to Lionel. "She's not the killer," he said quietly. "She was the next target." Lionel swallowed hard. "Then who is?" And in that moment, Price saw it, a set of muddy footprints, leading not toward the stairs, but back into the far corner of the cellar, toward a bricked-up wall and a loose stone at its base, with a child's initials carved faintly, M.H. Margaret Harrow. The past was buried here, and it was about to rise. Chapter 7. The final séance. The wind howled as Inspector Harold Price stood in the cellars of Harrowgate House, staring at the loose stone marked with the initials M.H. He crouched and pressed his hands against it. It moved with surprising ease. Behind it, a small hollow, no larger than a trunk, revealed a crumbling leather diary, tied with ribbon. It was damp and fragile, but intact, and its first page bore the delicate, slanted handwriting of a girl. "If I die, let this speak for me. My name is Margaret Harrow, and I saw everything." Price gently opened the journal as Lionel hovered behind him, pale and silent. Page after page, Margaret detailed conversations, names, and threats. She had overheard Sir Edmund Harrow speaking late at night in the study with a man she referred to only as C. They had been discussing mineral rights, illegal leases, and silent payoffs from a mysterious firm called the Northmoor Consortium. Margaret, curious and defiant, had followed him more than once, and she had learned too much. He said, if I told anyone, it would ruin the family, that I should keep quiet and be a good girl, but I couldn't. I told Evelyn. She told him I was just being fanciful, but I saw the fear in her eyes. I was going to tell Lionel when he came home from school. I was going to leave this house. The final entry. He followed me to the lake. I ran. I slipped. He didn't help. He just watched me fall. Price let the diary fall gently shut. Sir Edmund let her die, he said aloud. Or worse. Lionel's hands balled into fists. And all this time, I thought she'd done it herself. But there's more, Price said. Someone else knew. Someone who discovered what Sir Edmund had done and decided to mete out justice. The theatrics, the symbolism, the use of the legend. It wasn't Evelyn. It wasn't a stranger. He looked up. It was someone who loved Margaret. Lionel's brow furrowed. But who? That night, with the storm raging outside and the household gathered in the drawing room, Price called for a final assembly. Lady Evelyn, now revived and pale, sat silently. Godfrey stood behind her. Elsie clutched a handkerchief near the fire. Mr. Lively, the solicitor, had remained, curious and quietly worried. Lionel leaned against the fireplace, eyes dark with grief and suspicion. Price stood at the centre of the room, holding the velvet pouch, the diary, and the signet ring. This house has kept its secrets buried for too long, he began. But ghosts, no matter how old, have a way of speaking again. He paced slowly. Sir Edmund Harrow discovered sensitive information. He was involved with a consortium that was illegally mining land near Scarfell Moor. Margaret found out, and she became a liability. One night, she fled to the lake. Whether she was pushed or left to drown, Sir Harrow ensured she never came back. Gasps echoed in the room. But someone else knew. Someone who wanted justice for Margaret and vengeance on Edmund. That person began haunting this house in the guise of the Screaming Widow, using secret passages, soot, and symbols. Not only to frighten Sir Edmund, but to kill him, Lady Evelyn whispered. But who? Price turned to the maid. Elsie Brent. The room fell utterly silent. Elsie's face went blank. What? You're not just a maid, are you? Price said gently. You were Margaret's friend. You were the only one who knew the songs she sang. You remember the rhyme. You knew the hidden diary. I found your signature in the corners of the pages, a little daisy, the same one embroidered into your apron. Elsie shook her head slowly, tears brimming. No, I never meant for it to go so far. I only wanted to frighten him, to make him confess. You used camphor and a rare Indian toxin Margaret had shown you, one that causes fear before death. You put it in his tea, the same poison that nearly took Lady Evelyn. I didn't mean to hurt her, Elsie sobbed. She wasn't supposed to drink it. I only wanted her to remember. She did, Price said softly, but by then it was too late. Lionel looked stricken. You killed my father? Elsie stared up at him. He watched Margaret die, Mr. Harrow. He left her there, and he told me never to speak of it. And I stayed. I stayed all these years just to see him haunted by it. But he never changed. So I became the ghost. Price placed a hand on her shoulder. You could have stopped after the first mark. But revenge never stops, does it? Elsie dropped her head and wept. 3 days later, Harrowgate House stood quiet once more. Elsie had been taken into custody, though Inspector Price made certain her confession emphasised intent to scare, not kill. The poison's ambiguity may spare her a gallows sentence. Lionel sat in his father's study, the diary open before him, eyes wet but focused. She was braver than any of us, he said. Price nodded. She tried to tell the truth. She should have lived. Yes, Price said, rising, but now at least she's been heard. As the inspector walked out into the cold morning mist, the church bell began to toll in the village below. And in the highest window of Harrowgate House, where the wind whispered through the old stones, the sun caught on a pane of glass that, for just a moment, shimmered with what looked like the faintest outline of a woman's face, but when Price turned to look again, it was gone.